Good evening, everyone. It's good to be with you again on our program, Real Talk Family Life. I am sitting in for Dr. Neff this evening, but we are expecting to have a wonderful, wonderful program as we look at this subject, managing family discord. And this is part 2. We have with us again the 3 panelists from the last program, Reverend Ronald Nathan, Reverend Emerson Boyce, and Reverend Joseph Griffith. And they are going to walk us through this evening to help us to understand and to put into good practice some of the nuggets they're going to pass on to us this evening in managing family discords. So just before we start, though, remember you can send us a message in the chat, or during the program, we are going to have breaks for questions. You can ask a question, you can raise the hand, use the emojis. You can use the emojis also, give a clap, make some expression as you see fit. But we are going to have a great time this evening as we engage the panelists in this subject of managing family discords. So before we get into the program, for those who probably are joining us for the first time, let me just introduce the panelists again and just ask them, each panelist, to just give you a little background of themselves and to share their interest in the subject, and probably just to recap one of their key points that they would have made from the last program. So can we start with Reverend Griffith? Pastor Griffith?
Good evening, Pastor Henry, and all the listening audience. I do feel humble again to be invited in this forum. Clearly, you all know now that I am a pastor. It's what part of my whole life. I mean, I've been serving, I said, God for 40 years. So in that way, I have been a minister for all those years. From the time I started being a Christian, I was doing the work of an evangelist. And I go to church at the Caribbean Evangelistic Fellowship here in Barbados, and I am a Barbadian, totally Barbadian, all Barbadian. Married a Barbadian woman too, and have Barbadian children too. In regards to the subject, I just told you I'm married, so clearly I would be very interested in the subject because it'd be relevant to my daily experience, because I'm living 35 years in marriage, and I would have to manage both these young boys and manage the wife. And I heard somebody last week on this panel said, for the 40-something years or so they married, he and his wife don't quarrel, but they have good fellowship. He think he alone. in the same boat. So I hope that together we can share our experience and you can benefit. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Reverend Nathan?
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Henry. It is a joy to be on this forum once again. This is my second time, and I look forward very much to our discussion. I'm Reverend Ronald Nathan. I've been in Christian ministry for 42 years. Not that I'm competing with my colleagues, but I've held pastoral responsibility in the United Kingdom, in Trinidad and Tobago also, and I've served as a missionary in Kenya, East Africa. I spent most of my Christian leadership ministry, however, working for a number of Christian NGOs as a consultant on faith-based social projects, sometimes with government, sometimes also with churches or Christian organizations. And I have been around a bit, some 20 African countries, the US and the UK. And I'm pleased to be here today. I am the current minister and pastor of the Hogard African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church, which is located in Jackson in the parish of St. Michael in the wonderful nation of Barbados. Thank you.
Reverend Boyce?
Thank you, Brother Henry. I am Emerson Boyce. I'm Barbadian by birth. I'm a Bartran by marriage and association. I am delighted to be here on the second occasion. The last time I came screaming and spitting, tonight I came voluntarily. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been in Christian ministry long before I entered Bible school, and then they begin to count when you graduate that you're then into full-time ministry. So if I'm to look at that from 1976 to now, that's lots many years. And yeah, and it gives an idea of the number of years that I've been married to my wife, Jennifer. And I have served as a missionary pastor to St. Lucia for 4 years. Then I was seconded back to Barbados, where I served for 6 years. And I was the district bishop for my denomination in Barbados. Then I was again seconded to Trinidad, where I served in our Bible school and the administrative officer in the head office. And then from 1998 to the present, I'm serving with the Evangelical Association of the Caribbean, where I began as the Director of Evangelism and Missions from 2012 to the current time, and the Secretary General CEO. It's simply to say I'm a Caribbean person who served the church in the Caribbean. God bless you.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen. And so we get to the subject at hand this evening. So the family, families will have discords. We've settled that. We cannot get away from it. And we noted last week, we established a number of different scenarios, how discords can develop, etc. But one of the things that came up in the discussion is that discords can be settled, and one of the means of dealing with discords is through the win-win mindset. A number of folk left the discussion not being so sure about what the win-win mindset is all about. So I have a little scenario here, and probably Reverend Boyce and Reverend Griffith, you both can probably address this to help us to grasp how a win-win situation can be arrived at. So this is the scenario. John has been planning for months to take Mary on a surprise boat cruise to Mexico for Christmas. Last week, Mary asked John if they can visit her sister in Toronto during the same period. John hates the cold. Mary loves the snow. the family income does not afford both destinations. Where and what is a win-win in a situation like this? Reverend Boyce, you first, and then Reverend Griffin.
Okay. I love Stephen Covey, who defines win-win as a frame of mind, and it constantly seeks mutual benefit in all human interactions. Win-win means that agreements or solutions are mutually beneficial and mutually satisfying. What I've just said there, they're not my own words. They come from Stephen Covey, from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Now, what does it mean to have a win-win mindset? It simply means that we must realize that there are going to be hurdles, and almost everyone in the relationship wants to knock you out. You have to fight with opposing forces and let them call the test or whatever you will. But the goal is here to achieve your objective. I have found from my own experience in a win-win situation that integrity is very important, and that being loyal to those who are around me helps very much to create that win-win environment. Now, let's look at the questions put here to us, which I think after this, we should get our doctorate because it calls for a doctoral dissertation. Now, 1, the husband seemed to be planning a surprise, which seems to suggest the wife was not aware. Out of the clear blue sky, the wife says, hey, I called my sister and we go in Toronto. But the challenge here is the wife likes the snow and the husband likes the hot. Then there's a third ingredient. They got money for both trips. How are we going to introduce a win-win situation? Now, this is not totally a situation that I found myself in. It's almost more like that. But I'm speaking now from my own temperament and my own personality. Since I was planning privately and I had not disclosed it with her, I would not push. I would simply say, look, honey, while you're coming up with this, I had something in mind. I really wanted to surprise you. Now, you know the situation with the fact that you love the cold, I love the heat. But the fact here is that we don't have the money in our budget to afford the thing. So right away, I personally would let go of the guilt that I don't have the money. That happened to me once, and I sat and I spoke with Jenny, and I says, look, hear this, I will not go, and it was Canada, mind you, and I says, look, I will stay back and allow you to go. Now that worked very well, and I think that created a win-win situation. So I think this is just speaking from my own perspective. But what I would like to suggest here is that you can also consider and introduce in your discussion with your spouse that there can be other ways in how you can save for a trip. And it might mean cutting down on some of your day-to-day expenses. Look at some of the things you can do without. That happened to me when I wanted to purchase a new brand motor car in Trinidad. My salary was not affording it. And I sat with my wife and daughter and we said, look, these are the facts. And then we agreed in how we would go about it. And we were able to achieve our objective. I think there's a little more that I can say, but I would give way, using my friend's statement, I pause so that he could come in.
I'm going to introduce a copyright on that phrase. Now, I mean, the common factor must be, in every instance, I think our relationship is important and we must do everything to resolve or to keep that relationship going. And in the idea, when we look about the idea of win-win, it is how do we create a scenario where somebody is not always giving up or somebody don't always feel as though I'm losing or I got to win. All right. So clearly it seems as though that there's room for negotiation, there's room for compromise, and there's room for understanding. As I look at the scenario presented, I was specifically concerned about what I tried to find out what was really the common ground. I thought that they wanted to share some time together. All right. And the question about it is that I thought that in this case, since that the more likely he was going on a boat cruise, I assume that money is already engaged. And I thought that in the first instance that the wife could agree, they could agree together, look, we're gonna go together to this boat cruise because I was planning surprise and it come up, we're gonna have boat cruise. Now, what we have to, maybe has to decide now what's gonna happen maybe next year as we work towards saving this. John may not like the call, and therefore John may have to agree, all right, I'm gonna raise the money for you that you can go. And Mary might have to agree, all right, then I have to go alone, or we will go, is it about the snow? In other words, do I want to go because of the snow, or do I want to go to see my sister in Canada, and also I want my husband to join with me? Then perhaps we might be able to say we're going to go then, not in the call, but earlier, or I'm going to stay home and you're going to go. Ultimately, I think that there has to be a compromise. So maybe if we can agree that John was doing it for my good, he wanted to be together with me, and so there's a compromise. So my key word is in the compromise. If we go the compromising position, we will automatically fall on the win-win situation. I give it for you today. I understand your situation, but I also want to accommodate or find a way how to help you to achieve your objective also. That I think is a win-win.
Okay, Reverend Nathan, we have probably another minute or two on the subject. So you want to just chip in?
I was going to sing I Did It My Way. But I suspect that both of my colleagues have presented different types of win-win situations. So good on them. I think as I hear that situation, there's a number of opportunities for discord. Okay, and certainly I would want to find out why you want to go and see your sister now, because it might be that she heard her sister isn't well. All right, which would veto, but then if I paid for the ticket already, we could lose the ticket. So we have to check on those things. But I think that my colleagues have satisfied the needs of that question very, very well. And I'll keep my singing prowess to myself.
Okay, thank you. Now, Reverend Boyce started, he mentioned the Stephen Covey, and I had the privilege to be a facilitator for that program for many years. One of the aspects that, I think that Covey puts forward as a means of win-win or trying to achieve as a win-win is that sometimes you have to allow the other person to win in order to get a win.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that if you are the stronger person, let's say the man, all right, so that I am going to take the loss on this one. I'm going to go with you to Canada. We are going to go to Canada. I'm going to forgo the call, but we need to go to Mexico next year.
Yeah.
So that you have a win, but then the thing in achieving that is that you need to have an agreement.
Yeah.
Because it is easy to say, I will do this, you will do this, and then next year, when the time comes for me to get my win, you still want to go back to Canada again, and then you have even a bigger discord this time.
Yeah.
I mean, we are using the
Yeah.
Canada and the Mexico, but I'm certain that in everyday life, you are finding situations like this developing. So that it is good to have a win, but then, or to give somebody a win in order that you would get a win. But we in order to ensure that we have win-win, we must have agreement. So I'm going to allow Reverend Nathan and Reverend Boyce to come on to share on this one about having agreements or learning to develop family agreements to minimize discords.
Okay, Reverend Henry, I will want to share the screen in a minute,
Yes.
if you don't mind. But I want to go back to your previous situation. I think the agreement is also important because if we do agree to go to Canada, all right, I mustn't be complaining all the time. It's you that bring me up here. I didn't want to come, and because that is possible as well. And that could bring discord in the cold, which is double trouble.
Yes.
Yeah, because you don't want to get thrown out in the cold. All right. Okay. Maybe
you have access. You have access.
All right. Family agreements. So agreements on the whole is very important. Agreements are systems that allow us to be able to do some what we call risk anticipation. It also allows us to be able to put in place some systems and procedures that we know we would take given a particular circumstance. I want to give just an example of what a family agreement may look like. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, we
All
can.
right. This is a sample agreement. Now, I need to say that from my reading of things, and you have to forgive me, I have spent much of my life working with people who are considered to be low socioeconomic communities. So when I hear the illustration that was given before, I said, well, that is not Lavantie people. All right. Although Lavantie people travel a lot to New York. Okay. But also I recognize that some of the things that we are projecting is really about folks who have, let me say, a particular kind of mindset. All right. Because I am aware of the fact that there are folks who have never left Tobago and go to Trinidad. I've met others who have never been on an aeroplane. So as we come to think about these kind of agreements, this is something that really comes with a certain type of education. I don't want to say level, but a certain type of education. And especially if it is modeled by your parents and so forth, that's great. But the idea of family agreements is something that has really come out of the United States over the last 25, 30 years or so, out of family counseling sessions and that kind of thing. So that's the framework. I guess the idea of sitting in the kitchen or on the step and talking with each other, that is a little more Caribbean. All right. But we can encourage each other. In this particular family agreement, we encourage each member of the family to become like Christ. Now, this identifies the Christian nature of the family. Okay. And they become like Christ through loving relationships, healthy lifestyles, and stimulating experiences. Now, that is general enough to take in all the kind of scenarios that would come up in the family. Okay? And in this case, I'm illustrating with an extended family because sometimes we're living with grandma or uncle or auntie and so forth. But if I go to my next slide, how do you work a family agreement? Because I know quite a lot of people who say, yeah, we got this mission statement. It's really fantastic, but they don't work it. All right. It just basically is that little plaque in the corner. And we've got to work it. So it's something that we need to know, we need to learn, we need to reinforce. Some people talk about reciting it daily. Well, it depends how your work goes, right? But I say regularly. Right? So you have to know what it is, understand its principles. You have to talk about it, discuss it, and so forth. And then you have to use it, especially when you have big decisions to make sure that your decisions isn't going askew from the agreement that we have. It is definitely one that assumes that there is going to be discussion and agreement. All right. Then you move on to making sure that it helps you to maintain or regain your focus and realignment. Because sometimes we go off, you're passing down by the store and you see, boy, Wadi Lima, they have a sale. And next thing you know, you have a hire purchase agreement that you did not agree with your wife or with your husband with. And so you have to come back and take a look at, say, well, we need to regain our focus there. And then just my last slide, use your family agreement to guide your family educational plan. I should also admit that there are financial plans, all right? There are recreational plans, there's social plans that you can have. And certainly, but I have a holiday plan because folks might want to go off to Mexico and so forth. So you need to have your family plan. But with all your planning, you use your family agreement to guide you there. Please involve the children. All right, as young as they are, involve them, talk to them, find out their views and so forth. One, it makes the child feel that I'm a part of the family and that this is not just something that is the big people make up their mind and it had nothing to do with me so we have to involve them. And finally, have fun with it in the sense that enjoy it. It's not a rope around your neck to strangle you. It's actually a guide to help you better manage yourself and manage the issues and relationships that you will face. So over to you, Reverend Boyce.
Senor, you have said a mouthful. I don't know if I can say anything to add to what you want to say. So I think I'm going to concur and agree with what you have been saying. But apart to say that I can say from my own experience, while I may not have had a mission statement, we have had mottos like being examples. That was very easy to remember. And another one that we worked most of our lives with, others may, but we cannot. And that tied in with being examples. So we decided that is how we're going to agree in making certain decisions in our marriage and in our Christian experience. I like the idea of what you call involving the children. I had an experience where we are now seconded from Barbados to Trinidad, where I am stationed at the Bible school as the principal, and then in the head office. We simply said to our daughter, we are going to Trinidad. She saw us taking up everything, putting it on a trailer, putting it and getting on the boat and going to Trinidad. In her mind, it was a vacation trip.
Hmm.
So when we did not return to Barbados, one day came when I discovered that I had a very large, high telephone bill. So when I looked inside, I realized that she started to call all of her friends in Barbados. I don't know where she got the common sense from to know how to do it to Barbados. And then that dawned on Jenny and I that we had not involved her in the agreement we made to leave Barbados to go over to Trinidad to stay. And that taught me a lesson. Now, we had to quickly do damage control with Liz as young as she was, but I learned my lesson from that. And I agree with that. Here in the background.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think family agreements are very important, and it's important that we involve the children. Okay, let them know, because it's also a learning experience for them for when they're moving to adulthood and that sort. Yeah.
Mr. Griffith, you want to chip in, please?
Well, my position can be a little opposite somewhat, because there's so many people that seems to be naturally disagreeable. And even though Brother Nathan gave us a whole good list of good reasons why we should, you know what I mean, have agreements, I am disappointed that it is so difficult for some families to agree on basic things. And I think we need to understand that that is a reality out there. And the challenge really is how do we work in an environment where, one, we are naturally, we seem as though we are always disagreeing. Two, Brother Nathan did mention in his opening the concept of not everybody have the same educational background or the same capacity. And the scenario that we laid out here would be some person who have some kind of academic understanding, certain level, to be able to articulate this basically. Are we supposed to believe that our grandparents and all those other godly men before they have gone, that they had this kind of thing written out? And were they disagreeable or were they agreeable? And does this offer hope for others who may feel intimidated that they can't wait out, like as Nathan suggested? I want to pause having thrown that into the pool.
Okay, so for the three gentlemen, in as much as you have gone that far, we have moved far from our parents and our grandparents. And so our young people who are in the audience, they are faced now with the whole idea, even before getting into a relationship, to talk about prenuptial agreements. What do you say to them? How should we even entertain such, now that we are talking about agreements in family? Should we be talking about prenuptial agreements for young people? And as counselors, should you be talking about those kind of agreements before marriage?
I believe, like, we have already established that agreements are important. And again, our brother Nathan suggests that, it is more than suggests, when you are having an agreement, you are actually saying these things are liable to occur in our family, which may not be in our best interest. But if we can agree on how we're going to tackle it, then we will reduce the chances of all the negative things happening to us. Be in a better position to cope. All right. So yes, agreements become important. Now, since you mentioned the specific of the prenup, which is how do we manage when we go into marriage? How do we manage, for example, my responsibilities or financial responsibilities? If we can agree here now, it means that when we get down the road and something happened or something turned up, one, I already know how the money is going to be spent. If for some reason we divorce, we will know how this money is going to spend. The question we're going to ask ourselves is, but is this in fact relevant for believers? And is it only for those who got money and want keep all property for themselves? For me, I'm going to say as a Christian, one, I will not tell you whether or not you should do a prenup. I'm not going to tell you that, but it's personal, and you must in fact make a decision. What I would want to raise here is, like I said, why are the reasons that people want to do that? There are several reasons put forward why people might want to do so. All right, you and I know already in that there are Christians who do get divorced. All right, and invariably, I've heard about, we put them in a pool. This is yours. This is mine. Ideally, that's what's going to happen. So what do? Suppose that I came into a marriage with children from another marriage. We divorced, or my husband died and my husband left some things. You already got laws that say X% belongs to the husband and X belongs to whatever. How do we deal with that? I think that if a couple before they're married could sit down and say, listen to me, this property I bring into this marriage is what my husband left for the boys, for David and Michael. So once we lay out these things, we can know what we get into. And in other words, if you feel that the spouse or the spouse-to-be getting away that you're in like, you got up front, you are informed up front, you see me? Lay keep your ring, or she keep whatever, I keep mine, go along, it can't work. Also, you will find that sometimes you may get, if you get divorced, for example, once you have decided that already, the court won't have to decide it. On the other hand, you also might want to agree on, you might say in your marriage, look, this is how I'm going to pay the electric bill, you can pay the water bill. I'm not limited to that, but you can decide. So once we agree and make this agreement, then a case of debt. Now, we might say, look, you respond for your debt, or you will not go into debt unless you discuss it with me. So if you go outside of it, you're responsible. So I'm saying that these seem to be the grounds on which people do prenup, and they do not necessarily have to be bad. So from my looking at it right now, it seems as though that it is possible, and it might be. No, I ain't got none, and my wife ain't got none. My paycheck, my bank statements, my credit union statements, my money, everything be all about here talking about, and then a secret, basically. But I think given where the world is going, it might be important, especially for those of you who are getting married, to consider whether you might not want to have at least a discussion as on what your responsibilities are and what you think should be yours and what you think should be shared. I pause.
Okay, and let me give Reverend Nathan, see you want to come in. Go right ahead, please.
Oh, okay. I think that the standard prenuptial agreement is an agreed contract created before the marriage that spells out how money and possessions will be divided if divorce comes.
Yes.
All right. That is the standard definition, if you wish, for prenuptial. So it is, in one sense, almost anticipating this is how we will deal with things if divorce comes. As a Christian, I think we have or should have a fundamental difference in our understanding of marriage. I believe that marriage for a Christian is a covenant, not a contract. And that they're two different things. A covenant between a husband and wife where each is willing to sacrifice their own self-interests for the interests of the other. In other words, we're trying to outlove each other, outcare for each other. We're trying to go to the point where we are seeking in all ways to make our spouse, our husband, our wife as happy as possible. We have come to some agreements, and I agree with my colleague that we ought to have some discussions about what we are bringing into the marriage, and regular discussions about the directions we want to go in. However, I really feel that from a Christian point of view, and with the spiritual maturity that we are to grow into, because we are growing to know each other, we are going to become more like each other, the two becoming one, etc., that we need to look at that covenant relationship. 100 covenant relationship rather than a 50-50 contract. I'll stop there.
Okay. And just before Reverend Boyce pitches in his little piece there, if you have a question, please put it in the chat. And after Reverend Boyce, we're going to take questions. And so if you have one, put it in the chat. You can't type fast enough. You can raise your hand using the emoji. We'll recognize you and take your question. Reverend Boyce.
I have a confession to make, and I hope that you can find it in your heart to forgive me. I have never seriously given thought to prenups among Christians.
All right, neither me.
In my thinking, a Christian is one who should be like Christ. And I have always gone from the example or the platform of the persons in the Godhead to see how they have been able to work things out, and how Paul then pulled this in when he spoke to the church at Ephesus, as Christ loved the church and gave himself. And anything with what Pastor Griffith said or what Pastor Nathan said, I allow that to rest, and I'd really never given it thought, honestly. But listening tonight, it is something that I really must explore. My understanding of the prenup though came about because of Hollywood.
Rich people.
And now I'm saying rich people because I got poor people in Hollywood too. I'm coming to realize that, yeah. Not everyone they got open Elijah. And the whole idea is that it happens primarily where one party has more substance financially than the other. And because of the existing laws of the land, they don't want to suffer loss. It is also, I think, in a point that you brought up, that here is either the male or the female in the marriage, and they have that wealth, and it is already bequeathed to their children from a marriage that either end where the person died or they're separated, and they don't want that, so that is not going to be touched. But there are legal ways of doing that, so that it does not enter into the start of a new relationship. To me, though, a prenup among Christians is saying a whole lot, that it seems as though we cannot trust the God in whom we serve to help us override a number of the difficulties that we would face as we go forward. And if we cannot do that, we are not becoming the examples that we are expected to be when situations like these arise. And having the prenup, we are following the way of the world. That is as much as I will say, but to remind you, I had never really given it thought. Please find it in your heart to forgive me.
Brother Boyce, you're not alone. And if I may quickly, I have heard about I've heard a minister who find every reason and he got direction from God that he needed to divorce his wife, to marry another woman, to do ministry. You hold on a minute, right? I know, not to me, you don't know about people. I know about Christian people. Like they are faithful men and women to the Lord who are Christians. But the other person is different. Now, I just said this last word. I take my wife to work every morning and I drop her off to work and I come back home. I don't know. No, I don't think she's gonna wear. I don't know where she's go. And that my wife stayed with me for 35 years and because I good. You know what I'm saying? And because your husband or your spouse do something wrong, it doesn't mean that you do something wrong, you know. So even a marriage, unless, two can't walk together unless the two agree. Does it always happen? I pause.
Yeah, the thing is, though, I think Reverend Nathan began to allude to it a little earlier on. The situation is that here is somebody who has amassed a wealth of money early in life and has 3 children. He dies, father dies, and the wife, being a young woman, Paul recommends that she be remarried. Okay. She is getting into a relationship with somebody. She has a good inheritance from the first marriage, and she's coming in, and that inheritance, it was built for those 3 children from the relationship. She gets married to somebody else, and God forbid she dies. The new husband, by law, acquires the property by law. In most Caribbean countries, that's it. And so the children of the former husband who accumulated the wealth for her to pass to those children are now robbed from that, not robbed, but they're defranchised from that wealth because of the marriage.
May I comment further?
Yeah, sure.
I think that we cannot get away from the fact that we are in America's backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And the influence of the United States of America, they have the saying that if America has we catch the cold, right? Okay, yes. So we are being influenced by these things almost in every era of our lives. And so some of these things are slipping into our laws, into our vernacular, into our consciousness. So now Reverend Boyce is going to be telling somebody else something, because it has come our way. All right. And therefore, it is a matter that we would have to address. I need to say that sometimes the prenuptial agreement is not just one, there are 2. Because both people may be coming with wealth of some sort. Okay? Yes. So it's not only a case of one rich, one poor. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to say was that given the nature of finances and the financial sector, it may be wise to take a look at what happens with the shares and the investments that you are coming into a marriage with. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Reverend Griffith mentioned that there has to be agreement. Okay. So even if, as Reverend Boyce declares, we are Christian and we're not supposed to really be thinking that way, we still, it may not be prenuptial, but it might be pre the marriage that we have a discussion and an agreement.
Agreement, yes.
Okay. All right. That, and we say, well, look, so and so. But the thing is this, when we are seeing stars in each other's eyes, we are so comfortable. But when you see that divorce paper land on the door, okay, the devil does come from where the devil does come from.
It is correct.
And the same things you say, oh, sure, darling, baby, you know I wouldn't do that to the children and them.
Yes, yes.
It licks them children start getting, you know. Okay, so we do have to be aware that people change under certain circumstances. When that kind of discord comes, because divorce is not something to take lightly. Its impact is so deep that one has to be aware that as you enter into marriage, that you need to be mindful and knowledgeable about the resources that you have. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Reverend Nathan. We're gonna switch to another subject just now, but let me just ask if there are any questions. Anyone has a question that you would like to ask, just feel free. We take it now, and we're just gonna give 2 minutes so to answering your question. If not, we're gonna switch to the other subject. Okay. I think I see something in the chat. I haven't seen anything in the chat as yet, so I think we are going to move on. So here is the reality that doesn't matter whether the discord is large, great, painful, or what. Once there is discord, there is the likelihood of pain, bitterness, mistrust, sometimes anger. How should a Christian deal with these emotions when there is an unresolved discord, and preferably a biblical approach? Reverend Boyce and Reverend Griffin, take a shot at it first, please.
I'm to go first?
Yeah, anyone, yes.
Look, conflict, and I think we established this from last session, that conflict is essentially a part of human nature. And we go right back to the book of beginning, the book of Genesis. If you had not eaten, this would not have happened. Then we saw where Cain killed his brother Abel. Lamech, he killed another man and he boasted about it. The earth was full of violence and God wiped them out. But then Paul in the New Testament taught that one of the fruit of this flesh is our sin nature and its discord. So when we tie it all together, we are saying that discord seems to be part of the human nature, and it would enter into a relationship, whether you're born again or you're not born again. How should we treat with this disorder? Bad feelings, ill will, etc., from a biblical perspective. I begin first by saying that we must have the right attitude. And it's easy to say that, but when the rubber hits the road, sometimes even the Christian ends up saying some things they ought not to say. They end up doing some things they ought not to do. However, though, we are enjoined from Scripture that we should have the right attitude. Then it seems to suggest from the tenor of Scripture, looking at Romans chapter 5, that perseverance comes in here when you're looking at a biblical approach. So the hot temper, running off, and mouthing things that you ought not to say that you'll be sorry about. Instead, we need to control the emotions and whatnot. Then we should not say things that really, down the road, we really have to come back and apologize so much about. But the whole idea is that I believe from a biblical approach, we should talk to our spouses first before we talk to others. I know that key in our world today that you must have intervention by maybe going to a counselor. But I am one of those persons who believe that if my wife and I have a disagreement and we can talk about it first, we may not necessarily have to go to a counselor. And if you do, it is like for reinforcements to see how well that we have done. Now, the scripture gives me a platform from which I can speak to that in Matthew 18. And there are times that while my wife is my wife, she's also my sister in Christ. I am her brother in Christ. And the text in Matthew 18 suggests that there will be disagreement and that we should go first to the person who has caused us the hurt and pain and seek to resolve it. If that didn't work, then you go elsewhere. That's my understanding of the text there. Now, the idea here is that you show respect for your spouse. And I've come to realize that very often when I think that I am right, I might very well be wrong. And my wife has the point. So I have to respect what she is saying. Like a case in point, I was away on a trip. When I came, I got a haircut before I got back. And as soon as I landed in Maracas Valley, in the house, my wife told me, how are you looking like your father like that? And boy, I ain't talked to my wife for 2 days. In my mind, I thought I heard her say I was behaving just like my dad. Only she used the simile. How come you're looking like him? And even that brings discord. And then I had to, they say, eat the humble pie and say, look, I'm sorry for how I behaved. So from a biblical perspective, I think that one should accept responsibility for where they may have erred, where their attitude may have been wrong, and say, look, I am sorry. I've learned from experience that when you use the you word, you, it creates greater disharmony. And it might be better to you say, look, I do not like how you treated with me or what you said about the situation. I might be getting into some counseling here, but I'm seeking to bring some biblical undergirding to how I think that we should act. Seeking wise counsel, I think, is something that you would do maybe after. And I think I would pause there for now, and maybe I could come back later. Some other things that's coming in.
Pastor Griffith.
The operative word I think here we have is unresolved. And I think it implies that effort was made to address the issue. And I'm supposed to give an answer from the Bible. But I want to say up front that even though we are Christians again, in reality, these situations will come up. For many reasons, even in the case because I can be a Christian and my spouse may also not be a Christian, or we may both be Christians, but we may not be adhering. And for I've always said that whenever there's a divorce between Christians, I said one of them ain't in tune with God. Therefore, the word, they're not submitting to the word. But in Proverbs chapter 16 and verse 7, the Bible says, when a man ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemy to be at peace with him. I was having a discussion in a Bible study we had recently in regards to respect. And I advised that group that however we respond in a case where we feel disrespected, we must make sure that in our behavior, we don't say or do something that make us as guilty as the other guy. Just as in Romans 12:18, it says, as far as it's possible, and to the extent that it depends upon you, live in peace with all people, and that all people include your spouse. So again, it means that even though while the matter may be unresolved, I, who might be more spiritual, be assuming in that case, I remember there's a thing about praying in closet or you need some old lady, come in about that thing. And sometimes the only thing we can do is go in the closet and to pray. In Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 13, we hear that esteem, it goes to everybody, that we need to esteem one another in love. All right? And so in that way, allow peace to reign. And another word, I just mentioned two more scriptures. Another word comes out in Ephesians 4, and I think it's verse 3, where it says, endeavoring to keep the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. And I like this word endeavoring here. And I'm not looking to the Greek, I look at it as it means here, just in English. Think about the effort of endeavoring. Endeavoring, speak about, is difficult. It's taking a lot out of you. So the Christian attitude must be, the mature Christian attitude must understand it ain't gonna be easy. But look at James, my last verse. James said, confess your faults one to another. Maybe I need to tell my wife, look, you know, I know that this thing happened and it really got me bad. I remember years ago, I told my wife not call, but my wife made a decision to do an extra job. And I was mad that she can go work today and then tonight do an extra job. Why we gotta do that? Because she needs to get some extra money, whatever come up, I'm mad and I'm cruel. And then you know what? This thing I'm working on, Joseph. Being cruel ain't gonna help. Jen, let me talk. We gotta talk. You know? So, and I'm saying that in dealing with it, it seems as though communication needs to be open. First and foremost, can I communicate my feelings to my spouse? Even if I let her know I feel bad about it. Even if it's just that. We ain't get resolved, I feel bad. Or maybe I might need to call Pastor Henry or by the boys. Say, boys, I got a problem and I'm really angry. I feel like I got caught head, God forbid. You know what I mean? So I confess my faults and maybe he'll be able to tell up better, cool down. Because let me walk. Let me pray. You know what I mean? So I have some person who help encourage me. So I must do all that's within me. All right? Remember that I have a standard to defend. Sometimes I'm going to have to give up and suffer loss. And sometimes I need to call people that godly around me and say, I need some support. I pause.
Okay, great. I'm still not seeing any questions in the chat as yet, so we are going to move along. So, yes,
could I just,
yes, Reverend, go ahead, right ahead, sure.
Throw something in there. In speaking with young people in a particular program that was running in Trinidad and Tobago for youths between 16 and 24. My wife and myself would have to deal with the issue of anger management and conflict resolution. And one of the illustrations that we used to give to just help the young people to understand was that cerebral thinking happens here. Emotional thinking happens at the base of the head, very close to the spinal cord. In other words, emotions very quick, right? Emotions tend not to check with the brain. It tends not to say, let me get all the facts and then work out what is going to happen. All right. So emotions by their very nature. All right. If you think of it, emotions. So there's quick movement, right? So therefore we find that anger in particular can come to the forefront very quickly. And if we practice that, it becomes natural. And then we say, well, my father had a temper and I have a temper, you know, that kind of thing. But it's really learned behavior. and it's practice behavior. One of the things that emotion does is that it devalues the other person because you want to hurt them. You are so offended that you want to then let them feel what you are feeling or experience the pain you are experiencing. And so we tend to devalue each other with our emotions. How do we pull back from that? Well, sorry is always a good starting point. Saying a starting point, right? But we have to go a little further to begin to better manage our emotions. All right. I am trying to remember I think the man's name is Goodman, who wrote a book about emotional intelligence. We ought to become familiar with our emotions, familiar about what emotion does to us. So if you know when your hands start getting sweaty is because you want to turn to violence, it gives you a sign. Okay. Emotions out of control give us signs. All right. Some people start stammering, some start laughing in a funny way, some start shaking the leg, and those are signs. And if you follow the signs, you might be able to manage the emotion. Okay. So I just wanted to put that in there, and in particular, that issue about devaluing each other instead of highly esteeming one another, which is the biblical thing. So just one other quick incident. Paul went on to a mission trip, and John Mark came with him. Halfway during the mission trip, John Mark said, I want to go home. Paul vexed. I don't want a young man with me again, you know. I don't want him with me again. They agreed that they have to separate. Barnabas took him and went and did ministry. Paul stayed with Silas. But I think it is in the book of Philippians, if not Philippians, Colossians, we have a reconciliation that took place that Paul is saying, send John Mark to me. Okay. So there is room for agreeing to disagree, and it may not always stay like that. There could be a reconciliation.
Yes.
But quickly, that brings me to a scripture in Philippians. Philippians 2:3-5, which is a powerful text. And I'm going to quote it. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself, even if you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Yes. And this is the one that always hits me. Your attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ. Yes. That is the biblical thing. And then Paul again to the church at Corinth in Corinthians 13:5, when he says, love keeps no record of wrongs. Mm-hmm. And I think these are some of the biblical texts that you can use to put on the platform to show how you can deal with these issues that appear to be unresolved. To see that God spoke about them in his word and how we as Christians should be the examples to others, so that, yes, we would have differences of opinion, but we can handle them the way that we see from the way. I think tonight was very deep. Wow.
So I have one more question, at least, hopefully one more for you guys. There is a comment in the chat. I believe everybody has seen it. Thank you, Sister Maria. But what can family members do to help the person that is in pain from the the anguish that may have caused. I was doing a little writing this week, and one of the thoughts that sort of resonated in my mind is about our behavior. Sometimes we are not very conscious. We hurt people. And you know, they're in pain, and sometimes we don't even realize it. And I heard a little story from the Covey's videos about this little boy who was out in the wild, and somehow he got bitten by a snake. And I thought that you know, it could be so accidental. The snake probably bit him because he came too close to the snake. His first instinct, of course, is to kill the snake. You know, snake bite me, has no right to bite me. I'm human, you're a snake. And sometimes we find that sort of a situation developing in our relationship. You had no right to do this to me. I'm your husband, I'm your wife, and look what you have done to me. And sometimes the person did it and not even being conscious of what they were doing, not even fully conscious, like those who were crucifying Christ. They don't know what they were doing. They were just getting fun out of it. They didn't understand the full extent. How do you, the hurting person, help the person who have hurt, or how does the person who did the hurt or the pain, you recognize the person is hurting. You recognize, as I think Reverend Boyce said, when he got into that situation where he responded to his wife by misunderstanding. How does your wife help you to heal from your behavior, your hurt, and your pain in those moments? Anyone? Let me start with you, Reverend Boyce, and then we'll pass it around.
Emmy, just call the wife.
Yeah, yeah. Piggybacking on that situation, my wife was very nice. She came around and she said, "But honey, what's wrong with you, Emmy? What's wrong?" She, and her behavior, her attitude helped really to melt me. And it brought me to the end of my haughtiness, my anger, and eventually I apologized because I realized that I misunderstood what she said. And I believe that that is a key way of bringing a resolution to a misunderstanding. And I am ever grateful to Jenny for that attitude that she took. I believe more than ever, that was the Christ-like attitude. And she applied it to Emmy, and it melted Emmy. And Emmy had no other alternative but to say, look, please forgive me. I really misunderstood. Now, that's the easy part. But what happens if you have two pig-headed persons and they're trying to maintain? Just say, well, I'm right, you know, that stuff. I think that would go on and on until both or one decided, let me cover the sins of my spouse or whatever the case is. And I decide that I would be like Christ, look, and I give in for his sake and for our sake, for the children's sake, etc. I'll pause there.
Okay. Any of the other gentlemen, please?
The word again says, I mentioned it just now, as much as depends upon you. And I can recall for me times in my relationship where little issues came up and my wife would say, sorry. Now, I don't know if she can tell you that there were things that I held and I won't say sorry and she said God against me. I know I'd be a little surprised, but I can't talk about what I don't know. But I always found it interesting that she could say sorry, all right? And I think that being humble and putting value to the bigger picture is my relationship, and creating war and bitterness doesn't help. And even as I carry the pain and angry thought in me, it doesn't make me feel good. And I'm realizing how much energy I spent or one can spend when one is angry or not happy. So I could agree up front that in every instance as believers, we must understand that as far as depend upon us, we need to facilitate peace as much as we can. What can I do to resolve the issue? How can I help you? I'm sorry that it hurt you, but I had to make that decision, and this is why. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think it really calls for humility. I don't know. I think that is important. Humility.
Reverend Nathan?
I want to thank my colleagues for helping me to be able to frame a particular situation. I grew up in a home where the male figure, now I can say that he was army damaged. But at that time, he was damaging to me. Right? To the extent that he impressed upon me that effective communication came at higher decibels. Right? So, and even when one disagrees with a particular habit or behavior, it still has an impact upon you, so that later on in your adult life, you find you're repeating the thing you hate in someone else, in the bad parenting that came along, right? And so my wife has, on some occasions, find my voice going up. And she just call a name. And immediately I identify what's going on. And then, of course, you just have to humble yourself. I'm sorry. This is how I feel about the situation. But I ready to drop it right there and just leave the whole. Say, no. You're actually right. But the thing is the how. Yeah, the how. No. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yes. Okay, gentlemen, I received a message from Miss Nicola Lashley. This is what she says to us. I won't be able to make tonight because of the time difference where I am, but I'm looking forward to watching the recording of this very interesting topic. And she says, I look forward to watching the recording. And I would like to pose this question to the panel. Often bad timing can be a barrier to resolving discord. How do we judge the right time to try and heal a rift?
All right. I think we will always be trying to find the right time. And I said somewhere that Solomon, in praying, that in realizing his responsibility to deal with a whole nation that was so large a task, all he could do was to ask God for wisdom. And it caused me to remember when I was growing up, young apprentice at work, my early supervisor said to me, look, you may come to me now and ask me, can I have a few hours to step out and come back? He said, I might say no. He said, but a few minutes later, come and ask me again, I might very well say yes. And he said, timing is all about it. What I'm trying to say here is that I am sorry, my sister, I cannot tell you when is the right time. It is a wisdom that only God can give. and always looking for the opportunity for when is the best time to do it. You know, it is not easy. It's wisdom, it's discernment, and it's dependent upon the grace of God. But ultimately, we always remember that is important. I can't say no more.
Wrong.
Me.
Wrong.
All right. Dr. Martin Luther King once said, it's always the right time to do the right thing. What is the right thing? Sometimes the right thing is to shut your mouth.
That's correct.
Okay. Many times, men, especially when we feel we are right, but sometimes when we are wrong, we would run off when we really should stay. You mightn't want to say anything, or you may not have to say anything, but stay. The rum shop is not the place to go for counseling. The block is not the place to go for counseling. And your ex is certainly not the place to go for counseling.
That's right.
Stay right there.
That's powerful.
All right. Even if she rings out your ear, stay right there. She'll appreciate that. Emmy.
You have not left anything for me to say. Thank you very much. No, I agree with you. Both of you, my colleague. And I see the host is laughing in glee, and he agrees with it. My approach is that I get very quiet. I begin to process what I have done. And when I realize that I have done wrong, I make every effort to make the amends. I do not put pressure on my spouse if and when it should happen. But somehow, with wisdom from the Holy Spirit and His direction, He's helped us to sort our differences out. And I think it comes from the number of years that we've been together, learning from each other, appreciating each other, and be willing to say, I'm sorry when you realize that you're wrong. I used to trip in the early, as Ron said, the same things that I didn't want in me that I saw my dad, I found myself doing. And I really had to take that to God and ask Him to work on me in order to bring a resolution in me. That was not my wife's responsibility, that was mine. And I realized that my attitude, my behavior was causing hurt and pain. And so I decided that I would deal with me. What I've come to realize is that your spouse will appreciate you greatly when you admit that you have erred, or when you admit that you have a weakness here, or whatever the situation, and it makes life a lot easier. But again, I cannot say, well, look, this would happen this way, or this should be done this way. I take seriously what James said. If you lack wisdom, ask me, and I will give it to you. And I think when both parties take that road, it helps with the resolution of the conflict.
I take guidance from the person in the chat, and that's Anne, huh? That the wife needs to know that I'm hearing her. I hope that my wife knows or feels that I'm listening and hearing. I take your advice.
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you, panelists. I think it's a good idea not to try to resolve a conflict or address an adverse situation when you are angry, when one is angry. That is true too. So all of the suggestions in the chat, we appreciate your feedback this evening. We have about 4 minutes to go to wrap up. And so I am seeing Dr. Sutherland, our host, who has been away for a little while. She is joining us tonight. I'm not sure if she just wants to say hi. And I'm going to give the panelists 30 seconds to give their final thoughts.
Hi, good evening, Pastor Henry.
Good evening, Dr. Sutherland.
Pastor Joseph, Reverend Boyce. Good evening,
Hi,
everybody.
good evening.
Fantastic to finally get out of class early and be here. I have just been soaking in all the knowledge and the wisdom. Always a pleasure to be online.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Gentlemen, take a minute and your final thoughts, please.
My final thought would be the words of Peter in 1 Peter 4:8. Above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. And loving deeply, the original word used there gives the idea, it's a very picturesque word, like a guy where his muscles are straining. And the idea that comes out here is that you're straining to prevent yourself from doing anything stupid, and that you're going to walk the way that you know that God wants you to walk. And in the same way that God trained himself, even in going to Calvary for us, that we strain ourselves by resisting not to do the wrong thing, so that we can help our spouses to realize that we're not only here, but that we appreciate what they do in the relationship.
I want to say in closing that I am pushing for family planning. Okay.
Respect.
And by that, I mean that the courtship period is important to get to know the person that you are marrying. And in the early years of your marriage,
Yes.
planning, managing, learning to manage, learning to appreciate strengths and weaknesses, learning to understand one another is important. And that is part of family planning. Plan for the good times and plan for the bad times. Thank you.
I'm not going to say anything new. And the topic had to do with discord last week. The last time we were here, I posed it in the position of music. I am not a musician, but I think I know enough to bring this whole discussion again in closure by referring you to music. And when there's no harmony, there's a lot of discord. And music has rules. When we violate those rules, we will dance all over the place and will not create the harmony. Even when we have the orchestra, again, it needs to be coordinated so that the noise or the music that comes up is pleasant to the ear. There's too much bad news we hear coming out of families, and that's not what we want. We don't want to hear discord. We want to hear the harmony. And we must remember that music is the universal language. So harmony is universal. And when we can get our families to be living in harmony, then certainly we'll be speaking a universal language, and certainly God will be pleased. Good session. Bless you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor Griffin. The only problem there, you lost me, you see? You started to talk about this music. I only sing in the key Y. And some musician told me there's no Y key.
Don't worry, I will you too.
Every time I finish singing, somebody asks me, why did you sing?
I will you too. I say, I just at you.
Reverend Boyce knows the notes that I put out.
Yeah. We won't go there. That's between us. Okay.
Gentlemen, thank you so very much for a wonderful, interesting, full of knowledge and wisdom and understanding program. Thank you so very much. And I hope that the families who have listened this evening, that you would put these little nuggets into practice and make a better family life. That's what we're here all about. The program is all about real talk family life, building shatterproof families one brick at a time. We have put a brick in place this evening. Use it and make your family stronger. The Lord bless you. Do have a wonderful evening, and we see you in 2 weeks' time, when we will ask you to come to share with us some of the things that you would like us to talk about in 2022. In 2022, this is 21. So Lord bless you and good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very
All
much.
right.
Thank you to all.
Yes,
God bless.
Pastor James.
Thank you.
God bless you all and thank you.
Bye-bye.
Everyone, this sharing session.